I met my wife, Sarah, back when we were both in college. We got introduced by some mutual friends at a party, and I was instantly drawn to her lively personality. She had a way of making people feel at ease, and I was no exception. Not long after that night, we started dating, and soon enough, we both knew that we wanted to spend our lives together. After graduation, we got married, and not too long after, our first child, a beautiful girl named Lily, was born. A few years later, we welcomed our son, James. Sarah and I had been married for 15 years. She worked as a manager at a busy cafe, a job she loved because it let her be around people and lead a team. I worked in finance, a steady job that kept us financially secure. Life seemed good, or at least, that's what I thought. The first hint that something might be wrong came about a year ago, when Sarah started staying late at work more often. Initially, I did not think much of it. Her cafe was popular, and I figured managing it could be demanding. But soon enough, the late nights became a regular thing, and even when she was home, she seemed distracted, often on her phone, smiling at messages she did not share with me. One evening over dinner, she was unusually quiet. When I asked if everything was all right, she just said she was tired from work. I wanted to take her at her word, but something felt off. That uneasy feeling only grew in the following weeks. Then one night, she got a call and left the room to take it. I caught bits of the conversation, and it was clear she was talking to someone she did not want me to know about. When I asked, she brushed it off, saying it was just a coworker calling about the schedule, but her eyes told a different story. I began noticing other small changes. Sarah started wearing more makeup and dressing up more than usual, even on days she was supposed to be doing paperwork or handling inventory. She would leave early and come back late, always with some story about a work emergency. It was around that time that I began to suspect she might be seeing someone else. I did not want to believe it. We had been through so much, and I could not imagine her betraying our family. But I could no longer ignore the signs. To sort out my thoughts and figure out what to do, I started paying closer attention to her behavior. It felt wrong to be so suspicious, but I had to know the truth. I wanted to confront her, but I knew I needed more than just a gut feeling. I needed real proof. The whole situation consumed me. I could barely focus at work, and my performance started slipping. The thought that my wife, the mother of my kids, might be cheating on me gnawed at me like a weight in my stomach. As days passed, I realized I could not keep going like this. I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. With our anniversary approaching, I wanted to make it special, but I could not shake the signs from Sarah. I decided I needed some backup, so I reached out to my old friend, Tom. Tom and I went way back to our college days, and he was someone I could trust completely. I asked if he could visit Sarah's cafe as a regular customer to keep an eye on things for me. Without hesitation, he agreed. Tom went to the cafe one evening, finding a spot at a corner table where he could keep an eye on the counter. He ordered some food and quietly observed Sarah as she interacted with the staff and customers. After a while, he started noticing a pattern. Every time Sarah came around, she would head over to the counter where a young barista named Adam worked. According to Tom, there was a familiarity between them that did not look purely professional. He saw Sarah laughing at Adam's jokes, touching his arm lightly, and even leaning in close to whisper something that made Adam grin. The way they looked at each other made Tom uncomfortable, like he was witnessing something that should have been private. After a few hours of watching this, Tom had seen enough. He paid his bill, left the cafe, and called me immediately to share what he had observed. "I do not want to jump to conclusions," Tom said, "but Sarah and that barista, Adam, seemed way too close. It is not just friendly chat, there's something more there." Hearing this from Tom confirmed my worst fears, and the sinking feeling in my stomach only grew. I knew I had to confront Sarah, but I wanted to be absolutely sure before taking any drastic steps. For a few days, I mulled over what Tom had told me. Finally, I decided to go see for myself, planning to show up at the cafe on a night when Sarah would not expect me. When the evening arrived, I walked into the cafe with a heavy heart, took a seat near the counter, ordered a drink, and watched. Just as Tom had said, there was a level of familiarity between Sarah and Adam that went beyond coworkers. Sarah seemed more relaxed and open around Adam, and the chemistry between them was evident. Watching them, my suspicions turned into a painful certainty. The truth was right there in front of me. She continued working without raising any suspicion, and Tom agreed to help without a second thought. He traveled to our city and booked a room at a nearby motel. One evening, he went to the cafe, chose a seat at a corner table with a clear view of the counter, and ordered dinner. Keeping a low profile, he blended in with the other patrons while quietly observing Sarah and her interactions with the staff and customers. After some time, Tom began to notice a pattern. Whenever Sarah came into view, she would head over to the counter where Adam, a young and charismatic barista, was working. Tom observed that their interactions went beyond casual exchanges between coworkers. There was a sense of ease and familiarity between them that seemed out of place. Tom watched as Sarah laughed at Adam's jokes, gently touched his arm, and at one point, leaned in close to whisper something in his ear, prompting Adam to respond with a grin. The way they looked at each other made Tom uneasy. He noticed them sharing lingering glances before Sarah moved on to attend to other customers. After observing this behavior for a few hours, Tom felt he had seen enough. He paid his bill and left the cafe, feeling a mix of anger and concern on my behalf. As soon as he stepped outside, he called me and shared everything he had witnessed. "I hate to say it, but something definitely seems off," Tom said, hesitating. "Sarah and that barista, Adam, seem way too close. This is not just friendly chatter, there is something more there." Hearing this from Tom confirmed my worst fears. The sinking feeling in my stomach intensified. I knew I had to confront Sarah, but I needed to be sure of what was happening before taking any drastic steps. I could not accuse her without hard evidence. Over the next few days, I pondered everything Tom had told me. Rather than visiting the cafe myself, I decided to start investigating from a distance. I installed a GPS tracker on Sarah's car to keep track of her movements. Checking our phone records, I noticed several calls and messages exchanged with an unfamiliar number, which I suspected was Adam's. One evening, Sarah claimed she had to work late again. This time, I followed her from a distance, discreetly parking my car as she left the cafe with Adam. They walked to a nearby bistro and sat down, chatting animatedly. Watching them from my car, I could see the way they looked at each other and the intimacy of their conversation, confirming everything Tom had told me. It was then I decided I needed concrete proof of their affair. To gather indisputable evidence, I planned to capture a video of them, ideally on the night of our anniversary. The next day, I told Sarah that I had been called away on a business trip for a week and would be leaving the following day. She seemed oddly relieved, which only strengthened my suspicions. That night, I set up hidden cameras around our house, placing them strategically in the living room, bedroom, and hallway. My hope was that, in my absence, Sarah would bring Adam home. With the cameras set up and my plan in motion, I left for my business trip, staying in a small, basic motel just a street away so I could monitor the camera feed in real time. The motel room was sparse and uncomfortable, with poor Wi-Fi, but I did not care. My attention was focused solely on the live feed from the hidden cameras. 4 days passed without incident. Each day felt like an eternity as I anxiously checked the live feed, hoping for proof but finding none. The tension was overwhelming, and I found myself pacing the small room, replaying the events of the past few months in my head, trying to understand how we had ended up here. Finally, on the 5th day, my patience paid off. That evening, Sarah brought Adam into our home. For credibility's sake, I had taken our children to my parents' house, ensuring that Sarah and Adam would be alone. Watching the feed, I saw them enter the living room, with Sarah looking more relaxed and happy than I had seen her in months. They settled on the couch, sharing drinks and laughter, their bodies angled toward one another, the closeness between them unmistakable. They chatted and laughed for a while, Sarah leaning in close to Adam, her hand resting on his knee. The way they looked at each other left no doubt that this was more than a casual friendship. Then, as I had feared, things escalated. Adam began touching Sarah, his hands moving to more intimate areas, and they kissed passionately. It was painful to watch, but I knew I needed this evidence. They kissed deeply, their hands wandering over each other. It was gut-wrenching to witness, but I reminded myself that I needed this evidence. I forced myself to stay focused, ensuring that the cameras caught everything. They moved from the living room toward the bedroom, with the hallway camera recording every step. My heart ached as I watched them undress one another, their clothes slipping to the floor. Adam and Sarah continued in the bedroom, oblivious to the cameras documenting every moment. The scene was intense and intimate, with each touch and kiss underscoring the betrayal I felt. I felt my fists clench, my nails digging into my palms, but I knew I had to stay strong and gather the evidence I needed. The betrayal was complete and undeniable, recorded in painful clarity. Despite the intense anger and discomfort churning inside me, I did not rush home or confront them on the spot. Instead, I continued recording, sticking to my plan. It felt surreal, like I was intruding on my own life, but I knew that without this undeniable proof, Sarah could simply deny everything, leaving me with nothing to hold her accountable. Once they were finished, I closed my laptop and took a deep breath, my mind racing from the emotional turmoil. But I forced myself to stay focused. Now, all that remained was to edit the footage and prepare to present it on our anniversary. The video was explicit, the proof of Sarah's betrayal laid bare. Over the next few days, I painstakingly edited the footage, making sure to emphasize the most incriminating moments. I wanted there to be no doubt about the authenticity of what I had captured. After returning home, I kept up appearances, carefully planning my next steps. With a month still left until our anniversary, I knew I had time, but I also wanted to take one final step before revealing everything in my ultimate act of revenge. I decided to take a different approach and proposed a family trip. One evening, I gathered Sarah and the kids around the dining table. "I've been thinking," I started, doing my best to sound excited. "Why don't we spend the 2 weeks leading up to our anniversary in Florida? We can swim in the Atlantic, visit some theme parks, and just spend quality time together as a family." The kids were immediately thrilled, cheering and sharing all the things they wanted to do. "I want to see the dolphins!" Lily exclaimed. "Can we go to Disney World?" James asked eagerly. Sarah, however, looked uneasy. She quickly tried to come up with reasons not to go. "I have so much work at the cafe," she said, "and there's the upcoming inventory check. I can't just leave everything." Feigning obliviousness to her discomfort, I calmly countered each excuse. "I'm sure your team can manage things for a few weeks," I replied smoothly. "You've trained them well, and besides, you deserve a break after working so hard. If needed, you can handle the inventory check remotely. We'll have Wi-Fi at the hotel, so you can stay in touch with your staff." Sarah fidgeted, clearly struggling to find more reasons to avoid the trip. "What about the house? Who'll look after it while we're gone?" she asked, grasping for any excuse. I smiled, maintaining my calm demeanor. "We can ask a neighbor to keep an eye on things, or even hire a house sitter. There are trustworthy services for that. Really, there's no reason not to go." Seeing her excuses run out, Sarah finally managed a forced smile. "All right," she said reluctantly. "I guess a trip could be nice." I could see the unease in her eyes, but I pretended everything was perfectly normal. "Great! It's settled then. We'll fly out next week," I announced, to the delight of our children. Over the following days, I made all the necessary arrangements, booking flights, reserving a hotel, and planning activities to keep us busy. At the same time, I kept a close watch on Sarah, noticing her growing anxiety. On the day of our departure, I made sure everything was in order. The house was secure, and I had my laptop with the edited videos safely stored. As we boarded the plane, I glanced at Sarah, who appeared tense and preoccupied, while the kids were brimming with excitement, blissfully unaware of the tension beneath the surface. During our time in Florida, I made a conscious effort to be the attentive husband and father. We went to the beach, visited theme parks, and enjoyed family dinners. I watched as Sarah tried to relax and join in the fun, but there was always a hint of distraction in her eyes. One evening, as we sat by the pool, I casually turned to Sarah and asked, "So, what's the plan when we get back? Anything special in mind?" On the surface, it seemed like a harmless question, but I knew exactly what she had planned. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then forced a smile. "Oh, just the usual," she replied. "Get back to work and prepare for the anniversary party." I nodded as though I accepted her answer, all the while bracing myself for the confrontation that was drawing closer. This trip was a brief respite, a chance for me to gather my thoughts and strengthen my resolve. As we returned from Florida, only a few weeks remained until our anniversary. The happy memories of the trip were now overshadowed by the tension I felt each time I looked at Sarah. Just when I thought I had my plan set perfectly, life threw a curveball. 4 days before our anniversary, Sarah received a call that left her devastated. Her aunt, who she was very close to, had passed away suddenly. The news hit Sarah hard, and she broke down in tears. I knew this tragedy would disrupt the anniversary plans and delay my carefully orchestrated reveal, but I had to adjust to the new circumstances. Despite the anger and betrayal boiling inside me, I stepped into the role of the supportive husband. I helped Sarah make all the necessary arrangements for the funeral, which was scheduled for the next few days. All the while, I could not ignore the irony of my actions. The days leading up to the funeral were a whirlwind of activity. I took on the tasks of contacting family members, arranging transportation, and coordinating with the funeral home. Sarah was overwhelmed with grief, and I made sure to be there for her, offering a shoulder to cry on and comforting words. On the day of the funeral, I stood by Sarah's side, holding her hand as we paid our respects. The sorrow in her eyes was undeniable, and I felt a twinge of guilt for what I was planning, but I reminded myself of the betrayal I had witnessed, and my resolve stayed firm. As we returned home after the funeral, Sarah seemed emotionally drained. I continued playing the part of the caring husband, making her tea, cooking dinner, and ensuring she had everything she needed. That evening, as we sat quietly together in the living room, I kept my plan close to my chest, knowing that the time for confrontation was fast approaching. I wrapped my arm around her and whispered softly, "I am here for you, Sarah. No matter what happens, I will always be by your side." She leaned into me, tears streaming down her face, and whispered back, "Thank you. I do not know what I would do without you." The irony of the situation was not lost on me. Here I was, comforting my wife while secretly knowing her betrayal and planning to reveal it in a few days. The contrast between my outward actions and my inner thoughts was sharp, but I maintained the charade, aware that the time for the truth was fast approaching. As our anniversary drew nearer, I finalized the video and ensured everything was set for the reveal. Despite the emotional upheaval of the funeral, I stayed focused on my goal. I knew the impact of the video would be even more profound given the recent events, and I braced myself for whatever fallout might follow. In the days leading up, I continued to support Sarah, fully aware that the revelation would turn everything upside down. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but I kept myself composed, waiting for the moment when the truth would come to light. Finally, the day of our anniversary arrived. Sarah had started to recover from her aunt's loss a few days prior, throwing herself into preparations for the celebration. She carefully picked out a beautiful, elegant gown for the occasion, trying to regain a sense of normalcy. Meanwhile, I kept things simple, pulling out my wedding suit, which I had rarely worn since, and gave it a thorough ironing. I made sure there would be a large monitor set up at the event. The plan was to begin with a slideshow of our life together, a series of happy memories that would ultimately lead to the damning video I had recorded. The celebration took place at a charming country-style restaurant. Sarah and I arrived with our kids and were soon joined by friends and family. The atmosphere was lively and cheerful as everyone gathered to mark our milestone. Sarah was radiant, momentarily putting aside the grief from her aunt's passing. As the lunch progressed, laughter and conversation filled the room, creating a warm, celebratory mood. Finally, it was time for the presentation. I stood up and addressed our guests. "Dear family and friends," I began, "thank you all for being here to celebrate this special day with us. Sarah and I have shared many wonderful moments over the years, and I would like to take this chance to share some of those memories with you. The lights dimmed, and the slideshow began. Pictures of our wedding day, the births of our children, family vacations, and various celebrations appeared on the screen. The room filled with smiles, and some even wiped away tears of joy. Sarah held my hand, her eyes glistening with happiness. As the montage neared its end, I took a deep breath, preparing for what was to come. The final slide showed a family photo, all of us smiling and happy. Applause broke out, and Sarah leaned in to kiss my cheek. "Thank you all," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But before we wrap up, there is something else I need to share with you. It is unexpected and difficult, but it is important for everyone to know." Confused murmurs spread through the room as I pressed play on the remote. The screen flickered, and the video from the hidden cameras began to play. A heavy silence fell over the room, the atmosphere thick with tension. The footage showed Sarah and Adam in our home, their interaction quickly progressing to the intimate scenes I had captured. Gasps and whispers erupted among the guests. Sarah's face went pale as she realized what was happening. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and horror. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "This cannot be happening." The video continued, each frame underscoring the betrayal. When it finally ended, I stood there, facing our stunned family and friends. "I am sorry to share this," I said, my voice steady, "but I thought it was necessary for everyone to see the truth. Sarah, I trusted you, and this is what I discovered." The room was engulfed in silence, broken only by Sarah's quiet sobs. She tried to speak, but her words were lost in her tears. I do not know what to say," she stammered. "I am so sorry. Please forgive me." The reactions among the guests were mixed. Some looked angry, others watched Sarah with pity, and a few were too shocked to respond. My parents looked at me with a blend of sadness and pride, understanding the difficult choice I had made. Sarah's parents were devastated, their faces etched with disappointment. Our children, too young to fully understand, clung to each other, confused and afraid. "I never wanted it to come to this," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "But I could not keep living a lie. This was the only way to bring the truth to light and move forward." With that, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sarah and the guests to process what had just unfolded. The cool evening air hit me as I stepped outside, and I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The weight of what I had just done began to settle in. After a few minutes, I heard footsteps behind me. Expecting it to be Sarah, I turned around, but instead, it was Tom. He approached with a sympathetic look. "You did it, man," Tom said, clapping me on the shoulder. "That took a lot of strength." For a moment, I felt an unexpected sense of relief in his presence. I was at a loss for what was supposed to come next, and I nodded, grateful for his support. "Thanks, Tom. I couldn't have done this without your help. How's everyone inside? How's everyone holding up?" Tom sighed. "Sarah ran to the bathroom as soon as the video ended. She hasn't come out since. The others are still sitting there, talking, processing, sharing their thoughts. It is a lot to take in." "And the kids?" I asked, worry for Lily and James weighing heavily on me. Tom shook his head slightly. "It is hard to say what they are feeling. They seem confused and scared. I do not know if they completely understand the situation, but this will definitely leave an impression on them about who their mother is." I took a deep breath, feeling a pang of guilt for how this would impact them. "I just hope they can somehow come to terms with it." Tom put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Kids are resilient. They will need time, but they will be okay. Are you planning to stay here overnight?" "No," I replied. "I made sure not to drink so I could go home tonight. I need some time alone to think." "Got it," Tom said. "I will stay here and keep an eye on things. I will fill you in tomorrow on how it goes." I thanked him again and headed to my car. The drive home was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting a warm, peaceful glow over everything. Despite the chaos I had just set in motion, I felt a strange sense of calm. I was not yet thinking about the divorce, Instead, I focused on the quiet moment I had carved out for myself. As the evening deepened, though, the calm gave way to uncertainty about what lay ahead. I knew the guests were supposed to stay overnight at the cottage, and I hoped they would somehow find a way to salvage the evening, despite everything that had happened. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. Expecting Sarah, I was surprised to see Tom standing there with Lily and James at his side. "They wanted to spend the night with you," Tom explained. "They asked for you specifically." A lump formed in my throat as I welcomed my kids inside. "Thank you, Tom," I said, deeply appreciating his support. Tom nodded. "I will head back to the cottage now and give you the full update tomorrow." I watched him leave, then turned to my kids, who looked up at me with wide, questioning eyes. We settled in the living room, and I tried to create a sense of normalcy for their sake. "Dad," Lily began hesitantly, "what did Mom do?" James looked at me, waiting for an explanation. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Mom made some mistakes," I said gently. "She did something that hurt our family, and it is important for us to talk about it honestly. But right now, I just want you both to know that I love you very much, and we will get through this together." Lily and James nodded, still processing what I had said. We spent the rest of the evening playing games and watching movies, trying to create a safe, comforting environment amidst the turmoil. As night fell, I tucked them into bed, reassured by their presence. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing. It was Tom, letting me know he and my parents were on their way over. I quietly got out of bed, not wanting to wake Lily and James, and went downstairs to prepare some coffee. Soon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Tom and my parents standing there, their faces a mix of concern and resolve. They came in, and we settled in the living room, the atmosphere heavy with the aftermath of the previous night's revelations. My father was the first to speak. "We want you to know that we support you, no matter what," he said. "But we think it is worth considering all your options before deciding on a divorce." My mother nodded. "Your marriage has been through a lot. This is a huge betrayal, but it might be worth seeing if anything is left to rebuild." I sighed, grateful for their support but feeling conflicted. "I appreciate what you are saying, but I cannot just ignore what Sarah did. She shattered our trust in the worst way possible." "Where is she, by the way?" "Well," Tom said, "I did not pry, but she was clearly in deep despair when I left. By the time I headed out, only your parents, Sarah, and a few others were still at the cottage. The place will soon be vacated for new guests." My mind raced, torn between emotions, picturing Sarah in despair. It was both unsettling and oddly satisfying. "What do I do now?" I asked, almost to myself. "Take your time," my father advised. "Think about what is best for you and the kids. You do not have to make any decisions right now." I nodded, feeling the weight of their words. "Thank you, all of you. I need time to figure out what comes next. Right now, I just want to focus on Lily and James. They need stability." Tom patted me on the back. "We are here for you, no matter what you decide. Take it one step at a time." 2 hours after Tom and my parents left, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Sarah standing there. She looked surprisingly composed, given everything that had happened. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was a new resolve in her expression that I had not seen before. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside, allowing her inside. We moved to the living room, sitting across from each other, the silence thick between us until she finally spoke. She took a deep breath. "Before I came back here, I stopped at the cafe," she began. "I quit my job. I could not bear the thought of seeing Adam again or being in that place where I betrayed you." Her words were unexpected. "You quit?" I echoed, struggling to process what she was saying. "Yes," she nodded. "I needed to cut all ties with him. I had to start making things right. I know I hurt you deeply, and I cannot undo what I did, but I am determined to do everything I can to earn your forgiveness." I studied her face, searching for any hint of insincerity. She seemed genuine, but my wounds were still fresh. And what makes you think I would forgive you? I asked, my voice cold and unforgiving. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she held steady. I do not know if you will. But I have to try. I need to show you that I am willing to change, that I want to be a better person, for you and for our children. Seeing her in such a vulnerable state, an idea formed in my mind. I felt a surge of anger, and I decided to let it guide me, if only for a little cruel satisfaction. All right, Sarah, I said, leaning back in my chair. Let us see just how far you are willing to go. She looked at me, uncertain and wary. What do you mean? If you really want to make amends, I said, then you will have to prove it, starting right now. I want you to clean the house from top to bottom, every room, every corner. I want it spotless. Her eyes widened, but she nodded slowly. Okay. Okay. She agreed, standing up. And while you are at it, I continued, you will also need to cook dinner for the kids and me, something special. And do not think this will be easy. I am going to watch you the whole time to make sure you do not cut any corners. Sarah did not argue, she simply nodded and got to work. I watched her as she cleaned, each movement deliberate and thorough. She scrubbed the floors, dusted the furniture, and made sure every surface was gleaming. Despite everything, I found a strange satisfaction in seeing her determination to comply. When she moved to the kitchen to start preparing dinner, I continued to observe. She worked diligently, putting together a meal that filled the house with a warm, inviting aroma. Through it all, she did not complain or try to take shortcuts. She seemed genuinely committed to showing her remorse. As the evening went on, the kids came home and were surprised to see Sarah cooking. They sensed the tension in the air but chose to focus on the delicious smells wafting from the kitchen. When dinner was finally ready, we sat down together at the table. For a moment, it almost felt normal. The food was excellent, and the kids chatted happily about their day, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents. Sarah served everyone with quiet grace, her eyes flicking to me occasionally, searching for any hint of forgiveness. After dinner, as the kids headed off to bed, Sarah and I were left alone once more. She looked exhausted but hopeful. Thank you for dinner, I said, my tone still distant. It was good. She managed a small smile. I am glad you liked it. Do not think this changes anything. I warned. You have a long way to go before I can even begin to think about forgiving you. I understand, she replied softly. I will keep trying, no matter how long it takes. I stood up and headed toward the stairs, leaving her alone to clean up the kitchen.
What do you think about this story? Write in comments. If you don't follow our channel Cheating Room, you will probably never hear from us again. If you are subscribed, congratulations, you will not miss any exciting story. Thank you for listening to this shocking story with us. See you again.
Bye bye.